In this discussion, we will discuss the discussion question of explain how encumbrances would be used in a capital project fund. If we see a discussion question or essay question like this, our general goal is to add more information rather than less if time allows that, making it more likely that we're going to touch on those points being looked for within an essay question, or to be able to add new information to the discussion question. Keeping that in mind, let's look at this one more time. Explain how encumbrances would be used in a capital project fund. So if we see something like this, first we have a definition. One of our first items, or one of our first thoughts, might be to define encumbrances and to define what a capital project fund is. We also might want to take a step back and think about, okay, encumbrances from an accounting perspective is going to be something that's going to be used in governmental accounting, usually something in a modified accrual basis as opposed to an accrual basis. You can even take a step back and compare then normal governmental accounting and accounting for a for-profit organization at that point. So then if we come back into it, we're going to say, okay, the capital project fund is going to be a fund. I would always keep in mind as you go through any type of question, the two basic areas that you want to think about: the government-wide type of activities and then the fund type of activities. So the government-wide activities, the entity as a whole, going to be reported more similar to what we would expect because it'll be on a normal type of accrual basis, as opposed to the governmental funds, the biggest grouping of funds of which the capital project fund is a part, which just has a modified accrual basis, which is going to look a little bit more funny, a little bit more unusual, have some terms that are a little bit different, one of them being encumbrances. So encumbrances then, not something on accrual accounting, not something that would be on the government-wide activities, it being on an accrual basis, but in some of the fund accounts, especially the large group of funds, the governmental funds, those being on the modified accrual basis. So what are the encumbrances then? The encumbrances are going to, in essence, be like a holding account. You can think of them as a budgetary type of account, but they act a little bit different than the other budgetary type of accounts as well. I would think of it as kind of a holding account, a temporary account related to expenditures. So when we have expenditures, you'll recall on the capital projects funds, we don't have expenses, but we have expenditures. That's going to be one of the major kind of terms that we know that we're using a modified accrual basis as opposed to a normal accrual basis. So we can't record expenditures. It's similar to an expense until we've basically incurred them in essence. But we want to record encumbrances before that in order to show the encumbrance before that. When would that happen with regards to a capital project fund? When would we record an encumbrance? Well, when we have a contract, if we have a capital project, we're making a building or something like that, or we're making a road, we're going to hire someone to do that, hire like a private contractor, a contractor in order to do that. We're going to pay them from the government. Once we hire a contractor in order to do the work, nothing has really happened yet. They haven't done the work, and we haven't paid them. Therefore, we shouldn't record an expense or an expenditure under an accrual or modified accrual basis, and we won't. But we do want to record the fact that the significant thing has happened on the actual GL, something we don't do in normal type of accrual accounting. So we're actually going to record this kind of estimate. Very similar to on other funds using encumbrances when we send out a purchase order. If you send out a purchase order in for-profit accounting, then what happens is we're requesting inventory, but we haven't paid for it, we haven't received it. We usually track the purchase order because we expect to get inventory soon, but we don't record it. We don't record it as inventory or an expense. We don't record the liability at the point the purchase order goes out. Similar idea here with the contract. We made a contract, we made an estimate, we made a deal, we're making a request. Request doesn't mean anything has happened yet in terms of financial data, but both the purchase order kind of transaction in governmental accounting and fund accounting for the governmental funds, modified accrual, as well as the contract here in the project fund will typically result in a transaction actually recorded to the GL for the estimate. That being debit to encumbrances, acting like an expense, increasing encumbrances. It's going to be on like kind of a temporary type of accounts area, more like the income statement type of account areas. And so it's going to act kind of like an expense. The other side then going to encumbrances outstanding. What is encumbrances outstanding? We didn't know where to put the other side because this is like a new thing. We don't usually record financial transactions before they happen. We had to put the other side somewhere. We just put it into what would be similar to the equity account, fund balance account, for funds, for capital project fund. And so we just put it into the equity section. That's going to be the other side. Therefore, the encumbrances will always have a debit. It'll always be reflected with the related credit, equal and opposite, in the encumbrances outstanding account. So if we were to think of the life of the encumbrance, we would say, okay, we got a contract in the capital project fund, long-term contract. We're going to make a building. We're going to debit encumbrances at that point in time to let everybody know that we've committed to this contractor and we have this encumbrance. And then we're going to credit the encumbrance outstanding. Then in the future, the contractor is going to send progress billing. The progress billing is the point in time that we can actually record the expenditure. So that's when we actually get to record the expense, the thing that the encumbrance is basically holding the place of. So what we want to do then at the progress billing point is debit expenditure, like the expense kind of account, and credit, the payable account, contracts payable or something like that. But before we can do that, we need to reverse the encumbrance, which is sitting there holding the space until the expenditure can actually happen. The way we do that is we just reverse exactly the transaction. So that in that point, we're going to credit encumbrances, crediting like the expense similar type of account, which is unusual. We're going to decrease it because we're just reversing what we did last time. Debit the encumbrances outstanding, still having encumbrances outstanding and encumbrances equal and opposite, but now lower by the amount of the progress billing. Then we record the progress billing in the account that we normally would, which would be expenditures, like an expense, but recording the expenditure because we're in the modified accrual basis as opposed to the normal accrual basis, and credit the contracts payable at that point.